Any longer.
Yeah.
We're gonna wait some more. Next up is Gary Daniels. He is the Associate Director of the ACLU of Ohio and heads the ACLU of Ohio Regional Office in Columbus, where he lives and spent 2008. He's worked with the ACLU of Ohio for nearly 14 years. Before becoming the Associate Director, he worked for ACLU of Ohio in the position of litigation coordinator. He will be here speaking on empowering the individual in the political process. Gary Daniels.
Hello, everybody.
Hello.
Thanks for having me out here on a Sunday afternoon. I'm going to refer to my phone every once in a while for the time because I don't see the clock and because I don't wear a watch. So forgive me when I'm looking down like that. Glad to see you all here today. It was issues of secularism that first drew me to the ACLU and employment with the ACLU, among many other issues, but separation of church and state and related issues was what really motivated me the most. And I have had several different positions with the ACLU and with some other organizations, and now, so that you know, I'm primarily the lobbyist for the ACLU of Ohio over at the State House, and I'm here to talk about ways that you can be effective when you're lobbying people, how to lobby, and also do kind of like a sort of 101 of how a bill becomes a law. Remember that old I'm just a bill on Capitol Hill? This, you know, but they get an awful lot of that right, so some of this is going to sound familiar. But you know, I always think it's helpful to sort of review how the legislature works, because people know an awful lot and they think they know an awful lot, but then there are some things they find that they don't know. So I find, instead of you know, try to even this out for what I think the experience is in the room on issues such as this, but to get a general idea of the experience in this room. How many people have ever lobbied an elected official or a government office or anything like that? You know, it could be about anything. It could be, you know, taxes. Why isn't my road plowed, you know, after the snowstorm? Those are all forms of lobbying, whether you realize it or not. And what you guys are going to be engaged in is some more specific type of lobbying. But you know, one thing that people always want to know is whether they're going to have an effect with lobbying and how they do this type of stuff. And I'm going to throw a statistic out there. And I hope will become self-evident, but if not, I'll tie it together with lobbying. It doesn't matter. There's a particular organization that every few years takes a poll of people's civic knowledge around the United States. And they do this all the time through different presidential administrations. It never seems to matter what administration it is, but fully, at any given time, fully half of the people in this country cannot name the vice president of the United States. So, if you choose to get involved or stay involved doing this type of work, that is lobbying elected officials and letting your opinions known, you've got a leg up on at least half the country, because if half the country can't name the vice president, then they don't know what they're doing, and you know, you might as well count them out on things of this nature. And to tell you the truth, there's not a whole lot of people that lobby their elected officials about anything. I think for a lot of people, they just don't know how to do it. They think it's some sort of secret or mystical process, which it's not. And I hope that'll be clear by the time I'm done here. And some people are intimidated by talking to their elected officials, and you shouldn't be intimidated. I'll tell you, without, well, I mean, there's some familiar faces here from ACLU events and related events that we have around the area and around the state, but I think I can easily say that you're all smarter than at least half the people over at the General Assembly. So you've got a leg up right there. Now the staff might be a different story, but you know, you can have a real effect when talking to these people over there. So, and then we'll get into that. But just to give you some basic overviews of how things run over at the State House. The State House, of course, being that big building a couple blocks away, where the basically the Senate and the House for Ohio conduct their business. And I'll also say this: it is very frustrating when I talk to people who should know better, my colleagues and other organizations around the state, around the country, everybody seems to always know what's going on at the federal level, or many of them do, with legislation and laws, and asking, do you know what's going on with this, do you know what's going on with that. Very few people seem to pay attention to what's going on at the state level or the local level of their government, particularly at the state level, where what gets passed or not passed there can affect you a whole lot more than it does at the federal level. So I get people that are, they're nonprofit advocacy people on staff, on boards, whatever, and they have just shockingly little knowledge of what is going on at any given time over at the State House. So hopefully I'll get you guys, if you're not already, more interested in what goes on over there. Our General Assembly, that's what it's called. Every 2 years we have a new General Assembly, a new session over at the State House of the House and the Senate. They run on a 2-year cycle, and they run year-round. That is actually very unusual for state legislatures. We are in the extreme minority of having what is technically a year-round legislature, but I'll tell you, they take some time off during the summer and around the winter holidays, and when it's presidential election season, they're not seen very much of for months at a time. But theoretically, technically, they are a 2-year, year-round legislative section. Right now, in case you don't know, the Republicans control everything over there. The Democrats are irrelevant over in the State House. There are 99 representatives, 99 House districts in Ohio. The Republicans control 60 of those 99. The Democrats control only 39. So the Republicans have not only a majority over there, but what is known as a super majority over there, that they could override any governor's veto should they so wish, without having to worry about what the Democrats think about things. The Senate is 33 districts, 33 members. It's real easy to remember. Every Senate district is made up of 3 House districts. So you've got the 99 at the House, you've got the 33 in the Senate. Divided by 3, you get your 33. The Republicans control the Senate 23-10. They also have a super majority over there. Of course, Governor Kasich is governor. He is a Republican. And so you can see why the Democrats are irrelevant over there. Bills that get introduced by them are by and large don't go anywhere. Sometimes they do. Sometimes there's bipartisan support. Sometimes they work bipartisan on issues that would surprise you, including criminal justice reform and prison reform and drug sentencing reform. So some surprising things can come out of the legislature. But the point of this particular part is if, I don't want to stereotype here, but if you are not used to talking to Republicans, get used to it. Because they run everything here in Ohio, and that will continue to be the case for some time. Democrat might win the governor's seat in 2014. We don't know. That's a long way away, politically speaking. But what I want to persuade you from doing is when I get in rooms of friends of mine and they start talking about political strategy and how they're going to lobby and how they're going to do that, they say, oh, let's talk to Representative so-and-so, our Democrat friend in our district, or, in the neighboring district, or somebody knows, Representative Democrat so-and-so. Not to be curt, but who cares? They do not matter over at the State House currently. If you want to get things done, what you're talking about doing is working with the Republicans and getting their attention. As far as how legislation passes, gets introduced, and how all that works, we'll go over this very quickly because I think you all probably have a real good idea, but maybe I'll tell you a few things you don't know. Bills can originate on either side, that is the House or the Senate. As they get introduced, they get assigned a number in their respective chamber. So the first bill introduced is House Bill 1, the House, the first bill introduced in the Senate is Senate Bill 1, of course. And then, SB 2, SB 3, SB 4, as they continue to get introduced. Many of these bills, most of these bills do not go anywhere. It's a small amount of them that actually work their way any meaningful way through the legislative process, and then an even smaller amount that actually get passed into law from there. Most of these bills, this is something I have found as people talk about ACLU, the conservative group out there that is very influential in state legislatures across the country. I have heard my friends on the left complain about how ALEC comes in there with these gift-wrapped bills and just hands them over to legislators, and the legislators take those and introduce them as laws. And isn't that a horrible thing? And what are they doing with all of that influence? Everybody does that. People are mad at ALEC because they are successful at what they do. But let me tell you, everybody from the Sierra Club to Greenpeace to Planned Parenthood to the ACLU does the exact same thing. From our perspective, as lobbyists and legislative people, you are successful if you can get legislators to adopt your bill as written and introduced into the legislature. So that's something I'm working on right now, and the rest of the staff is working on. But keep in mind, when you get mad at ALEC, if you do get mad at ALEC and related groups, they are doing nothing different than just about anybody else does, leaving aside the money and the trips and the junkets and all of that. But just in the introducing legislation and getting the ears of the legislators, that is not a surprise.
Their bills are all wrong.
Sure. But they tend to move in different ways and among different issues. Who really is responsible for drafting a lot of these bills, or at least taking pre-prepared language and making sure that it doesn't conflict with other areas of Ohio law and all those types of things, is a government body known as the Legislative Service Commission, or LSC. This is a group of lawyers. They sit through all the committee hearings, they draft legislation, they help again make sure there's no conflicts going on. And a lot of times what happens is a legislator has an idea for what they want to do. I want to, speaking of ALEC, I want to make sure that welfare recipients are drug tested. And then they might just hand it over to LSC, and LSC comes up with the bill. They can be very involved in the process, not so involved, but it's LSC where a lot of the action happens. Once bills are introduced, they typically go to a committee. The House and Senate both have committees. Some of the names, you think you might not know them, but they should sound familiar, whether it's at the federal or the state level. You've got like your Agriculture Committee, you might have your Criminal Justice Committee, your Judiciary Committee, your Health and Human Services Committee, Education. You might have any number of different committees that handle specific topics. Those committees are made up of legislators of both parties, and then whoever is in command as far as party goes is assigned as the chair of the committee, and they're the traffic cop at that point. They decide how many hearings a bill gets, whether it gets hearings whatsoever. They schedule votes if they want to do that. The chairperson is a very powerful person, the most powerful person when it comes to a particular committee. So it always helps when you are visiting and talking to legislators to know not only what members, what committees they are members of, but whether they are chairs of any particular committees. Because when you talk about who am I going to target about a particular piece of legislation, the first place to start really is, in many cases, or most cases, is the chair of that particular committee. Now, if it passes through, gets introduced, as the representative hearings, and their own internal rules are that every bill gets 3 hearings for the most part, if it's going through the process. So typically this looks like the cleanest way possible is you have a sponsor hearing, sponsor testimony, sponsor only testimony. The sponsor stands up and talks about why he or she thinks that this is a great bill and which should have its colleagues' support, et cetera, and then they sit down, unless there's some questions, and it's all very easy. And then the following 2 hearings, if there are 2 more hearings, one will be proponent testimony, and one will be opponent testimony, typically. Now, I have seen it where a bill gets introduced and they have sponsor, proponent, and opponent testimony all on the same day. I've seen bills where there's been a dozen hearings, where you might have 2 or 3 different hearings that are all opponent testimony, 2 or 3 hearings that are all proponent testimony. It really depends on the bill, the chairperson, but the cleanest way again is, let's say, 3 hearings, sponsor, proponent, opponent. But be mindful that this can be mixed up any given way. Bills pass out of committee by a simple majority, and then from there they go to the other chamber. So if it starts in the House, it goes to the Senate. It starts in the Senate, it goes to the House, and it works its way through the same exact process. Through the committee, and then from the committee it goes to, for instance, if it starts in the House, it'll go to the full House for a vote, in which which case, if it gets approved, then it gets kicked over to the Senate. All very basic stuff I understand, but I feel better talking about it and how it works. If during this process a bill is changed at all, and that happens all the time, it gets changed through the process. So it's not enough to ever just look at a bill as it's introduced. You want to keep following and monitoring it throughout the process. But when it gets changed in two different ways. If it is a minor change, or a fairly minor change, that's called an amendment to the bill. If it's a more substantial change, they will say, well, it's not going to be an amended bill, it's going to be a substitute bill. It's like it doesn't resemble that first version of the bill so much, so we'll just call it a substitute bill. There's no magic line or teeter-totter or scale or anything for whether it's amended or substitute. That's left up to the discretion of, I'm not even sure, committee chair, LSC, I don't even know. It's not that important, quite truthfully. But all you have to know with amended or substitute is that it means the bill has changed. After which, for instance, if it's House Bill 1 and it gets amended, it's no longer House Bill 1. Everybody will keep referring to it as House Bill 1, but technically speaking, it becomes amended House Bill 1 or substitute House Bill 1. Sometimes you might have a substitute bill that later on gets amended. Then it becomes amended substitute House Bill 1. Whatever. House Bill 1. That's all you really need to know about. But when you're looking it up and you see these changes, amended, substitute, all these different things, again, what it means is that this bill has been changing over time. Committees are also where you can make an awful lot of impact when you're talking about influencing the legislature. Keep in mind that these folks are very busy, these legislators. When you go in there to talk to them about a particular topic, you probably know more as an interested person, whether you are a professional or whether you are a lay person or you're part of an organization as a board member, volunteer, supporter, what have you. You probably know more about that given subject than they do. They have to know all kinds of things about all kinds of subjects all the time, while they're also out there meeting with constituents and in turn attending committee meetings and fundraising and driving back and forth to their district. And so they don't have a whole lot of free time to brush up on a whole lot of issues. This can actually be a good thing for those of us who are either lobbyists as professionals or lobbyists as people involved with organizations or what have you, because it gives you an opportunity to help influence them on an issue. I actually like many times talking to legislators and their staff when they don't know a whole lot about an issue, because it gives me the opportunity to put my own spin on that issue and present it to them in a way that I hope that they adopt and see through that particular lens. And there's nothing wrong with that. That's what people do all the time when they're trying to influence legislators and elected officials. Now, when you go testify, and this is something that I hope you guys will do in committee hearings in the future, whether it's on these particular issues that have to do with secular society, or other issues that you might care about, because none of us are one-issue people after all. We all have different types of issues. And I will mention that this all works too. All of these processes and everything you're hearing about are very much copied at not only the federal level, but the local level. So keep in mind that I'm talking about the state legislature, but this applies just as easy at the school board, at the board of elections, city council, county commissioners meetings, all of those types of things. So these are all good skills and information to know. When you go and testify, I can leave you guys, if you ever get interested in this and want my card, contact information to maybe get more information. But there is a process, a formal process that comes with testifying on bills. Typically, you want to have written testimony that you want to distribute in advance to the members of the committee. There's usually a staff person who handles the committee. They might ask for like 40 copies of your written or typed testimony so that they can then hand it out to the committee members. Ideally, you're getting it to them with some good advance notice, so hopefully they'll take a look at it, but you never quite know. A lot of times they're reading the testimony while you are delivering it, they're reading it while you're going along. And then when you're done with your testimony, however long it is, and keep this in mind, hey, keep your testimony short. There is no reason, unless it's an incredibly complex issue or bill, to go in there with 10 pages of testimony, with 5 pages of testimony. Look, I do this professionally with all kinds of bills all the time, and I have a general rule of thumb. No more than 2 pages of testimony. And if I can't say what I need to say in 2 pages, then I really need to reevaluate how effective my testimony is. And that includes like a third or half a page of, I work for the ACLU. The ACLU is the oldest, largest civil liberties, all that kind of stuff that the sort of boilerplate stuff you put in your testimony. It's really about a page and a half of trying to get my point across in testimony. There are other people testifying that day on that bill, probably, or maybe. There are other bills you're going to hear testimony on. There is more testimony they're going to hear tomorrow. They might not remember so much the 2-page testimony you give, but they'll certainly remember that you're the pain with the 10-page testimony, and they're just going to blank out over time, and they're not going to listen to you. And again, unless it's totally complex. And if you have more information to get to the members of the committee, consider what you could be giving them when you're not testifying, but can be doing it more behind the scenes at an earlier or later date, or both. But what you're basically trying to do is get your point across to the legislators with testifying. And then when that's done, they might ask you questions. That's part of the process of testifying. Is they might ask you no questions. That's not unusual. Thank you very much for your testimony. You can go sit down. Or they might ask you all kinds of questions. Some of the questions might be hostile. Some of them might be friendly softballs. But you better know your stuff when you go to testify, because you don't know what they might ask in question and answer. And just so you know, there's also a process involved with testifying, a protocol, let's say. So, for instance, if Bob was the chairperson of the committee, you asked me a question, let's say you're Senator Smith, so you would say something like, you'd get permission from the chair to ask me a question. The chair would say, sure, no problem, or something to that effect. And then when I answered and everything, even though I'm talking to Senator Smith, I would say something to the effect of, it doesn't have to be exact, but something like, from the chair to Senator Smith, from the chair, something along those lines, where you're acknowledging the chair before you're talking to the person who asks the actual question. It's fairly minor, but there is a protocol that goes on when you're testifying. So it's nice to know how things go, and you will see people do this. If you go to testify, you're probably not going to be the first person that day. So you will see this protocol develop over time, and it's something you should follow. You're there to earn friends, which we'll get to here very shortly. But that's the idea. You're there to build relationships, earn friends, and hold yourself out as a credible resource on topics that are of interest to you. I have seen, because I'll tell a couple stories of how you can have an effect on these issues, because it's what you're ultimately trying to do. A lot of people think, oh, I'm just one person. What kind of effect can I have? I sit through all kinds of committee hearings because you might just be interested in one bill in a particular committee, but they might be hearing testimony on 3, 5, 7, 9 bills that day, which means I sit through plenty of testimony that has nothing to do with my job, but I'm there listening to it anyway. And I've seen it in action where one person testifying can stop a bill in its tracks. And sometimes it's just, it's not a professional person, it's not a professional registered lobbyist or anything, but it's somebody who literally comes off the streets to share their opinion about something. I have seen this happen, not stop anything, but help advance stuff. When I talked about how the Republicans have passed criminal justice legislation on a very positive note, dealing with this issue of how many people we put in prison and how long they stay there and they get out pretty soon, and we've got this this revolving door of prison inmates in this state here. And so they passed some very specific bills that went through the committee process and everything. And ex-offenders, people who've gotten out of prison and are now trying to get their lives back together, have gone there and testified. And normally when you testify, the legislators on the committee are, they're entering and exiting the room. They're on 2 committees that are meeting at the same time, so they're going in and out. They're talking to themselves. They got staff people coming in saying stuff in their ear. They're reading stuff. They look like they might not be paying attention. They might not be paying attention. But while this is all going on, you're also trying to deliver your testimony and get the attention of these people. And that's something you don't want to, again, be intimidated by, but you had these ex-offenders up there talking. They weren't even talking about the particulars of the bill. They were just talking about what their experiences were as an ex-offender trying to reintegrate into society. And that's what the crux of these bills were really all about. And I saw legislators putting down their pens, closing their books, and listening to these people about what their experiences were. And it was bringing them back to why they're passing these bills in the first hand, even if they weren't talking about the particulars of the bills themselves. Sometimes they were talking about issues that had nothing to do with the bills in front of them. But legislators, even the worst ones, even the biggest jerks over there, tend to treat lay people much differently than they do professionals. If I would have done that, I would have probably received some hostile questioning. But they were there to listen. And I think when ex-offenders came in to advocate for themselves, it made a real big difference with those legislators. Look, even being with the ACLU, we have an effect over there getting them, and that's not an easy thing to do on changing different bills. I can give you a couple examples of where we've had success making bad bills better or stopping bad bills in their tracks. I'll give you an example. There was a bill this past session that basically, if you are impaired at the doctor's office because of a particular drug, you might be taking a prescription drug. If you are impaired, they want to be able to, whoever it was that was pushing this bill, wanted to be able to have your doctor or medical staff contact the police and your employer and a whole list of other people that you are potentially driving around town impaired on this drug. It doesn't have to be that you are, but there's even just the possibility, and the language was written so broadly. It was because of drugs, or because of any medical condition, which could be, geez, are you prone to have strokes or epilepsy or anything like that? Basically what they're trying to do is violate people's medical privacy if they think you're a danger driving around, again, on drugs or with some medical condition. And we went there and testified against the bill. And had some opposition from the committee. There was some Q&A going back and forth. And I said, look, the ACLU gets a lot of criticism from a lot of people about the issues that we follow and that we pursue. But you'll never, ever hear anybody say, you know what, we need less medical privacy. And it was like a cartoon. I could literally see the light bulb pop up in heads around there. The bill never got a hearing after that. And it died at the end of the session, and they amended the bill slightly according to our concerns. But we've been able to, the point is we as an organization have been able to pick our spots. Sometimes you won't stop a bill. Sometimes what you might be trying to do is make a bad bill better. But you shouldn't be afraid of anybody over there. They will hopefully listen to you, but not always. When you try to schedule legislative visits, they might refuse to meet with you. They might meet with you and be somewhat hostile. But those people are few and far between. There are some true jerks over there. I won't name any of them by name because I have to work with them, but now and in the future. You really should be going in there with the attitude that they work for you. And when you're dealing with your legislators, what I think what's especially important is you are ideally doing it as a constituent. The people who are going to be the most receptive to you are worried about whether you have the power to vote for them or not specifically. You should always hopefully be able to get a meeting with a politician, with an elected official, who you have the ability to vote for. If it's a neighboring district, if it's a different part of the state, don't be surprised if they don't want to meet with you as a lay person or tied to some particular organization that is not professional like me having to run around and do this all the time. Don't be surprised though, because they've got an awful lot of people coming in to see them about all kinds of things. You guys are going to be engaging in a lobby day tomorrow. You might not be the only lobby day over there tomorrow. I guarantee there will be at least several lobby days going on this week over there on all kinds of issues. So they see lobby days all the time over there. And like I said, even without lobby day, they've got people trying to get their attention all of the time over there. Um, uh, Keep in mind also that this is about building relationships with these people. A couple of you walked in late, and I'll repeat what I said earlier. That means in this legislative atmosphere, dealing with Republicans because they run everything over there. So, for instance, if you are going to meet with any particular legislator, find out what makes them tick, if at all possible. There are biographies, whether it's on their official House page, Senate page, campaign page, that oftentimes lists professional organizations, what their job might be or was, other than being a legislator. It might say what churches they belong to, whether they have kids, what school district they live in. Ideally, you want to try to find, this is about making friends with them. This is, if all you are doing is going to meet your legislator once about a particular issue, then you're not doing your job, because things don't get changed so much with one contact. It's repeated contact over time, and again, building this relationship with them. You're going to meet with legislators tomorrow in their offices, but you can meet with them in the home district also. I said they meet year-round, 2 years, theoretically around 2 years, but there are times when they're in their home districts doing these things, having these meetings, meeting people in their offices, their home offices, out for coffee. It's another opportunity to get to know these people. Some of you will most assuredly, because it's the way it works with every lobby day, you'll be meeting with staff instead of the legislator. That is not necessarily a bad thing. Ideally, you want to be meeting with the legislator him or herself, but keep in mind, sometimes the staff is more intelligent than the legislator, or they know more about what's going on than the legislator, or they might know more about a particular issue. They surely do on some issues than the legislator, but you don't want to blow off the staff person, because first of all, they are sort of the gatekeeper to the legislator in question. So you want to be friendly and offer yourself as a resource, and I think we'll get to that. And also, long-term thinking, because these things don't change overnight. You don't know who that legislative staff person might become. John Kasich, the governor, started off as a legislative staff person here in Ohio. So keep in mind, those relationships you build with not only legislators and staff, can pay off over time. You want to hold yourself out as a resource for legislators, but you don't want to be a pest about it. Sometimes that can be a real fine line. You have, it is somewhat of an advantage when talking with legislators, because you are probably not going to be there. What's promoting you as secular and sectarian issues and the intersection of those. A lot of staff and legislators might like to talk to you because you're not there talking to them about money. We need money for this. We don't want this cut. This affects our business, our organization, our county, our whatever. A lot of staff, I find, just like to sit around and talk purely issues with you, because that's why they got into this in the first place, not to have people burning up the phone lines and the emails with, we need money for this and that. And there's been studies over the years with legislative staff and everything about, who they would rather talk to, and they would much rather talk to the people that come in there not looking for money and who are advocating on behalf of certain issues. You should, when meeting with legislators, not be afraid to say, I don't know. Because sometimes you'll get asked questions. Don't make it up. Don't say what you think the answer might be, unless you add that caveat or disclaimer. But don't be afraid to say, you know what, I don't know, but I will get back to you on that. Because you can either go look up the information, talk to somebody who has that information, and it gives you an opportunity actually to continue to build that relationship with the legislator or with the legislative staff. And keep in mind, legislative staff over there is usually only ever 1 or 2 people, depending on whether you're a committee chair. Everybody gets 1. Some have 2. Some might see a 3rd person running around the office, but this isn't like the United States Congress where they have all kinds of staff people designated with particular issues and what have you. It's much smaller over there. And so when you're talking about the gatekeepers to legislators, you're only talking about a person or 2. But again, don't be afraid to say you don't know, but just make sure you get them that information. If you say you're going to get them information at a later date, get that information. Ideally, if this works out okay, we want to build such a relationship with these folks that they are calling you about things. You know, oh, look, we got this bill. You know, there's not that much that's going on over at the General Assembly right now in the last session that involves, let's say, church-state issues, religious liberty issues. The only one that comes to mind from last session, and this was a bill that went nowhere, and had sponsor testimony, and that was it. And some bills, when they're introduced by a certain time, their internal rules are you must have at least a sponsored hearing kind of thing. So for all I know, that's all that was going on with this. But it was to give academic public school credit for what a kid learns, a student learns during release time. Now, some of you don't know what release time is. I know that. I didn't know what release time was until I started working for the ACLU. But release time is something that's very popular in rural districts, southern schools, and what have you. And it's basically, I'm a public school student, and I am going to leave class a certain time of the day, and I'm going to go get religious instruction, and then I'm going to come back to school. Yeah, so it could be an hour out of the day. It's called release time. It totally interrupts the school day. And you know, some rural districts, you get pretty much the whole class going to this thing, you know, and then you get like, you know, the atheist kid, the Jewish kid or whatever that's left behind, and that causes obvious problems in a small rural setting when you're the one kid that's not going to this thing and your 30 classmates or 60 classmates are going to this. And for some reason that I've never been able to quite fathom, but decades ago, the United States Supreme Court upheld it as being perfectly constitutional, even though it interrupts the school day in the way that it does. But what the United States Supreme Court never said is that you can get academic credit for going off and getting religious instruction as part of release time. Well, this bill last session would have done exactly that. It would have been a horrible idea. I'm sure if it would have went through, the ACLU would have ultimately sued over it, but it never went that far. Nobody ever had to worry about it. But on an issue such as that, let's say that if that was in play right now, I mean, you know, part of the thing is we all organize better around a crisis, and it's hard to proactively get ourselves together and move the ball forward when there's not a huge crisis. So unfortunately for you guys is that there's not a whole lot of, you know, church state ring the danger bell type bills going on in Ohio all the time. At the same time, that's also pretty good. Because when you look at what's going on in other parts of the country, I saw something the other day, I think it was in Oklahoma or Nebraska, where you would not be permitted to flunk a kid who brought their own personal religious beliefs into the classroom. So for instance, the example that they were using, I haven't looked at the bill, I don't know how specific it is, but the example they kept harping on was that you couldn't, for instance, give a kid an F if the kid maintained that dinosaurs and humans existed at the same time, because that was part of their strongly held religious belief. So this bill is passed now saying, no, you can't do that. And so you get these states out there that screw around with creationism in schools and all of these other types of things. That kind of stuff is very much absent from the Ohio General Assembly, and that is a good thing. And you guys are here to keep the pressure on them and make sure that's a overall, I'm not saying everybody over there, but overall, when you compare them to other state legislatures across the country, in many ways they're a fairly moderate bunch. You know, you've got your outliers, you've got your people that believe very strongly in some issues, you'll be anti-choice, these types of things, but they're not the people that are out there willy-nilly running around, you know, passing procreationism bills and school prayer bills and all of these other types of things. And again, you know, that can be a very good thing. But your job essentially, and I'll end here in a second so we can do some Q&A if you guys have any, but what you guys are really trying to do is influence legislators. Make your opinion known. Again, there's nothing wrong with it. You're exercising your First Amendment rights by doing this, and it's how things get done. You're providing information to these folks about your particular issues. Again, most of them aren't going to know anything about a particular issue, or they'll just know the broad brushstrokes, put you in a great position to help influence what it is that they're doing. You're building relationships with legislative staff and these legislators, and ideally, what you're also doing is finding other people who believe the same way you do, and you're building coalitions of people. That's what this is right here, basically, a coalition of people interested in one particular issue or set of issues. Sometimes if you go testify, and look, you can, all those committee meetings and everything, those are open to the public. You can go there, sit down, watch all these things. Nobody's going to card you. Nobody's going to ask you why you're there. Nobody's going to do anything like that. But you might see people testifying for or against bills you're interested in. It happens all the time. And then people grab you as you're leaving the room and say, hey, can I come over here and talk to you? And then coalitions get built, and that's how movements start and continue on. You want to recruit others and do this coalition building. Happens all the time. It's part of what I'm doing over there. Part of what I'm doing is not only listening to what's going on and the testimony that's going on, but it's also finding out who else thinks the same way as we do, as the ACLU does about particular issues. So you don't want to leave that part out of it, because there is, after all, strength in numbers. Well, I think, I could say a couple other things, but I think I don't want to get too into the weeds with some of this type of stuff. Here's the one disadvantage for you guys as lay people, that is, you're not subscribing to professional services that send you this information and everything. It's very hard to find out what's going on over there on any given day. Right now, with the session going the way it is, now keep in mind, they're over there, they're always over there at least 3 days a week. They do all their business on Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. It's when they do all their committee hearings and everything else over there. The schedules. So here's the thing. I don't know, nobody knows until Thursday afternoon or Friday morning at the latest what the committee hearings are going to be for that following week. I don't know what my schedule is. I didn't know what my schedule was for next week until Friday afternoon, when all the committees report in as to what they're having. But I subscribe to a little service that sends me that information also. You guys can find online, you can find, if you look up like Ohio House calendar, Ohio Senate calendar, you can eventually find what the committee hearings are. But keep in mind, what you want to do is follow the legislature to any great degree. Look, nobody, not me, not anybody else, knows what these committee hearings are going to be until just before they happen. Again, the Thursday and the Friday before the Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. So bills that you might be interested in might be moving real quick. The ones who are that look like they're going to actually move, again, if it's introduced only by a Democrat, it's not going anywhere 99% of the time in this legislature. But if you notice, week after week, they keep scheduling hearings on a particular bill. That's an indication that it's probably moving. If you see it getting amended or substituted, that means it's actually moving its way through the process. It might have a hearing and then not have a hearing, though, for 3 or 4 more weeks, but then another hearing pops up on it. That's an indication it might still be moving. If you see it get introduced and get assigned to committee, and you don't even see like news of like a sponsor testimony hearing, yeah, it's probably not going anywhere. And the other thing that I think works to your all advantage is, and I've been telling people this, is on all kinds of different issues, is Governor Kasich is running for governor again in 2014. He might have some presidential or vice presidential ambitions on top of that. He has had them before, and people are talking about that he might have them again. That works to all of our advantages on controversial social topics and issues, because I can guarantee that Governor Kasich does not want before him, leading into the 2014 gubernatorial election, he does not want another like Senate Bill 5. He does not want a heartbeat bill. He does not want like some creationism bill. He does not want, now who knows if those things will eventually reach his desk, those types of issues. They might not, but I can say from a purely, I haven't talked to the governor about this, I have no inside specific knowledge, but I can tell you generally, politically speaking, the governor does not want that stuff anywhere near his desk and his signature pen leading into 2014. The name of the game now is trying to recapture those moderates and independents and everybody else. We saw how the last national election went in November. Many people on the right could not keep their mouths shut about certain subjects that worked very much to the advantage of the national electorate that were their opponents. I think in Ohio, a lot of people have actually gotten that message. I think a lot of the leadership in the General Assembly and the governor have gotten that message. But you've always got those rambunctious, loud legislators from different areas that don't have to worry about primaries and everything else, pushing on these issues too. So this will be a very interesting General Assembly to see what makes it through the pipeline and what does not. But I think people will be very nervous about controversial social issues working its way all through the process and up to the governor's desk. So that was an awful lot of information over about 45 minutes, which is what I was told that I had. I can always fill up more, but I know you guys have more to talk about and do today, and we do have some time left for Q&A. So if there's any questions you have about how this whole process works, or what you might be up against in the next day or in the future, I will be happy to try to answer those. And I always say try because I'm not afraid to say I don't know on certain subjects, just like I do with legislators from time to time. But if you have any questions or anything, I'll be happy to take a crack at them. Anybody nervous about talking to their legislators?
I'll be talking to, I don't want to say unfortunately, but 2 Democratic representatives tomorrow, right? So as you're telling me that I don't stand much of a chance for my issues to go through. So while talking to them, should I ask them, well, what are they collaborating with some of the Republican representatives, something like that? As far
I
as
would, my own, look, this is just one person's opinion.
Okay.
And I'm not, part of your group, alliance, coalition, whatever. What I would do if I was visiting a Democrat legislature is, nice to meet you. Nice to see you. These are the issues that I'm interested in. Would it be okay if from time to time I check with your office to see if there are any bills of this type I might be interested in? Is there a way that I can hold myself out as a resource? Are there, part of it is you want to get the legislators talking. A lot of times they love to talk. A lot of times a legislative meeting might be a half hour long and I only get 5 minutes to talk. And that's not necessarily a bad thing. You're building a relationship with these people. The Ohio House person that you've talked to today, look, the Democrats might be in charge someday again with the House. I mean, last session it was a Democrat House, after all. Gerrymandering is changing all of this, but the Democrats could be in charge at some point again. That individual that you're talking to could go on to higher office. A lot of times these are the people, Barack Obama, he was Senator Obama in the U.S. He was State Senator Obama in Illinois before he became U.S. Senator and then on to president. You want to keep in mind that any number of these people could be, maybe they're not the most useful people to know right now, today, or tomorrow, but they could be very useful in the future, and they can also be useful in tipping you off when certain things come up. Now, I wouldn't expect after one meeting, unless it's the best legislative meeting ever, for them to say, oh, it was nice meeting you, Representative Smith, and then 2 weeks later they're on the phone saying, hey, I got wind that this bill might be coming down the track, and it's something you should be worried about. I mean, even the very positive relationships I've built with legislators, I don't usually get that type of information because, again, they are about as busy as you can be as a particular person. And unless you, gave their infant son CPR in the parking lot and brought them back to life, they're going to forget you after a meeting, probably. So again, this is not a one-shot deal. You want to keep this relationship going. But sometimes talking in this particular atmosphere, talking to the Democrats, they can give you a heads up as to what might be coming, what the Republican colleagues might be thinking about, talking about. But you're trying to build positive relationships with these people. It could be at some point that representative or senator introduces you to somebody else who's particularly helpful on any given issues. Building relationships, that's what lobbying is all about. Lobbying, I don't have to dissuade anybody from the idea that lobbying or testifying or making a positive contributions to this whole process is just a one-time thing, because it's not. This is something that you want to continue to foster over days, weeks, months, and years. So that's, just in my opinion, you just, talk to them about what they're, what they, their interests are in this particular issue, or whether they have any particular interests in this issue. Hopefully, whoever you are meeting with is going to be totally honest with you. I very much admire whether I agree or disagree with somebody if they are frank with me. Don't tell me what you think I want to hear. Don't waste both of our times. But there's plenty of legislators over there, to their credit. Now, they might totally disagree with me, But some of them, they'll let me know right off the bat. It's like, okay, great, then we don't have to worry about doing this dance where you keep telling me what you think I want to hear, and then I keep bothering you over time. You're like, so we should just go away. Well, you would have said that in the beginning. But no, build that relationship with those folks. That person isn't going to be there forever. So, so that's Representative Smith, and then Representative Jones takes over for that person, in 2 or 4 years, let's say. Then what do? You make another meeting with that person, and you say, it doesn't have to be about anything in particular. It could be a nice handwritten letter, what have you, but you sit down with them and say, hey, when Representative Smith was in office, or Representative Jones, whichever one, the previous one was in office, I would stop by from time to time and talk about these issues of secular values and how important they are and everything. And I just wanted to let you know that I'm out there, and I'm out there as a resource, and I'll probably be contacting you from time to time. I know you're a busy person, but if I think there's something you might be interested in, I'm going to go ahead and pass it along every so often, if that's okay. And of course, the legislator is going to say, sure, that's fine, because they get a million emails and a million publications and testimony and letters and all that type of stuff. But keep in mind, too, when you're talking to people, because people are like, if I go and do this, if I go testify, if I go in a meeting, is it really going to have any kind of effect? Is it, again, back to the very beginning, 50% of the people in this country can't name the Vice President of the United States, no matter what year or administration it is. Most people, the overwhelming amount of people, don't contact their elected officials about anything. So if you do any amount of it, you're ahead of the game. And they're not used to hearing from people on this stuff. I've gone and testified at the Columbus School Board, and there's not a single other person testifying there. There's hardly anybody in the audience. So if you commit yourself to doing even just some of this, it doesn't have to be full-blown, you're doing this 24/7 kind of thing, but if you do even just some of this, you can have some sort of effect. I've seen it happen, it continues to happen, but again, it's an ongoing thing over time. That's a long answer. Anybody else? We'll go with you and then you.
Oh, I was just going to ask, who is the Vice President of the United States?
Were you part of that 50%?
I'm just kidding. No,
This may be a little off track, but not really. Okay, meet with my wife and I are meeting with both our state senator and our rep tomorrow. As a sort of introductory thing, I was going to mention, well, for starters, okay, let's look at the Ohio State motto. Okay, with God, all things are possible. As a starting point. I mean, that right there effectively excludes a significant portion of Ohioans. Is it even worth mentioning that? I mean, that's not something, obviously, we're going to go and ask them, like, this needs to be changed right now. Do you think that's even worth mentioning as sort of just a plant in their heads, part of our message? That we're sort of a demographic that has been pretty much, we're not really acknowledged all that much at all.
I think where you're going with the second part of what you're talking about is much more effective than perhaps getting into specifics. Or if you do want to get into specifics, you leave it for later. With God, all things are possible. That motto, the motto itself and its inscription on the State House grounds is not going anywhere anytime soon, if ever. We sued over that, we lost, I'm sorry. But you fight it. I don't think it's news to any of you that are more interested in secularism than sectarianism, that you are fighting an uphill battle. And you are fighting an even more uphill battle over there with the General Assembly, with the State House, than you are with the general public. So anything that you say that snips of a secular nature to some of these people is unfortunately going to come off as wacko, as extremists, as whatever. You're the people that want to rip the Ten Commandments off and kick Santa Claus out of the town square. And why is everybody saying Happy Holidays to me at Best Buy instead of Merry Christmas in December, and it's the end of the world? And people get worked up about this type of stuff in ways that are illogical and unimaginable. Just as a quick aside, when I was on the legal staff and I would help recruit clients and plaintiffs to particular lawsuits, and look, I've been working with the ACLU for almost 15 years, and I've had roles in defending convicted rapists, convicted murderers, the Ku Klux Klan, the Nation of Islam, all kinds of controversial groups and everything out there. But nothing gets people worked up the same way church-state issues do. I would always have a different conversation with people if they were going to put their name on the dotted line on a lawsuit of ours, it was church state, I'd say, realize what you are getting yourself into here. And let me tell you what I have seen in the past with some of this sort of stuff. So you see the kids at school get hassled, they get pushed into the lockers, the mailboxes get vandalized, poop gets thrown at the door, they get called all kinds of nasty things online and at town meetings and everything like that. Are people prepared for that level of potential scrutiny when they're signing their names on a church state lawsuit? I always want to make sure, because people should know we don't want to seem like we're pulling the wool over anybody's eyes or anything. I want people to make sure what they're getting into when they sign this. Anna back there has a press release on our Jackson lawsuit with the Jesus picture in the school hallway kind of thing. Our clients in those cases go in there as does. And they're doe clients for a reason. You know, we can defend all these other controversial groups and controversial people, whether they're controversial for good reason or who knows why they're controversial, but it's the church state stuff that gets people the most worked up. So again, I say all of this to know you're fighting an uphill battle with a lot of these legislators on these issues. One person's opinion again, but if you go in there starting off your meeting and saying, I don't like that motto, I don't like the way we use it, and I think we should get away from it, you know, the hearing in the room is going to start to shut down. The legislators hearing everything. But I really liked what you said. You said, some of what you guys do or what goes on and everything, we're a group of people that aren't used to being listened to, and we understand we're in the minority, but understand when you do certain things, it affects us, whether people are non-religious or they're religious, but prefer a secular society, all of these other types of things. You're used to generally not getting listened to on a lot of the stuff, except for, with the Constitution and Bill of Rights, which says you shouldn't be doing these types of things. We see this stuff happening, all the time, religion intersecting its way into all kinds of different areas of public policy and what have you. So unless there's a particular bill out there, and I know there's not, but you might want to, I think, again, I don't know, I didn't organize this, I'm not part of it, but it would seem to me what you're trying to do is just basically get the point across that you have, people who follow the same types of things you do, that believe in the same types of things you do. There are more people than just you. You are there representing them, and you would like them to keep that kind of thing in mind when they're passing laws and doing things. You can appeal to their conservative nature, which I try to do when I talk about these issues, and I'll basically say something like, you think that the government should be out of absolutely everything in life, except for interjecting religion left and right with all kinds of things. You think that the government screws up everything, but for some reason you want the government teaching religion in public schools. I try to appeal to their conservative, limited success. Hopefully over time, it's a message that starts to resonate. But keep in mind, because I have to keep this in mind all the time when I'm over there working for the ACLU. You're facing an uphill battle. Know again who it is that you're talking to and what they might think about certain things. You shouldn't be afraid to talk to the most, just as you're not afraid to talk to the most open-minded representative or senator, you shouldn't be afraid to talk to the most conservative one out there either, the one who might disagree with you the most. That old adage, this is not a sprint, but it's a marathon, is absolutely right. We're not going to all change the world tomorrow, of course, but it's planting seeds over time on some of these types of issues, and hope that it pays off in the future, ideally. I was given the 2 minute, I know she wasn't giving me the peace sign, I know that was like a 2-minute warning kind of thing. Any other questions, anything like that? Otherwise, I'll tell you, my colleague back there, Ana Perez, has got a table full of information and propaganda from the ACLU. I know, of course, that you are all, of course, members of the ACLU. And if you're not, I think we probably got a way to join that thing. Our membership envelopes or something. I don't want you, after I'm done, to create a stampede back to join the ACLU if you're not already a member. But it's the way we do the things that we do, that we can travel around the state and do things of this nature. So if you're not already, I hope you consider becoming a member. And also, we just revamped our website, acluohio.org, to make it much more legislative heavy, among other things. You should be able, on a daily basis, to be able to follow the bills that we are following in the General Assembly. So when I say it's kind of hard for you to follow, follow certain information and everything, go to our website. If there is a bill impacting church, state, religious liberty, what have you, go to our website. We'll have our positions up there, we'll have testimony, if any. We including what we're doing now, is putting up legislative schedules for the bills that we're interested in. So, you know, if you're interested in House Bill 1, because it would mandate the teaching of creationism in public schools, it's an example. That doesn't really exist. But you'll be able to follow all of that on our website. Quick question here.
I'm sorry, just real quick. How do, if you're already involved in a bill, and, you know, obviously you said you're posting these things on your website, how do individuals get involved with, like, reporting back to what you're doing? I mean, because you're a big employee, so, you know, to be able to get involved in that bill.
I am, you know, it's a symbiotic relationship, because I will tell you, whether you're the ACLU or anybody else and you go up to testify, sometimes I literally do feel like I can just go up there and say, I'm Gary Daniels from the ACLU. You know what I'm going to say, right? Okay, you know, so it's not what, you know, next, you know. But when I talked about, you know, I saw the ex-offenders come in, and you rarely see, like I said, putting down their pens, they're closing their books, they're doing whatever, they're listening to these people. On some of those vicious dog bills and everything like that, exotic animals, I saw lay people getting up there and talking about issues affecting farming. I've seen farmers go in there and talk about particular issues. I think in many cases they're much more inclined to listen to the non-professional, you know, the person who's not getting paid for this or who doesn't do this, you know, all of the time. You know, people coming off the streets, whether they're part of the coalition or not, they're very interested in hearing those people, especially again, the closer you can get to being their constituent, the better. So really it's a question of how can we help each other. I can leave my contact information for anybody, actually, anybody who's got a pen or anything like that, and I've got business cards too, but gdaniels@acluohio.org. That's how to reach me by email, gdaniels@acluohio.org. You can always email me there, ask questions. Again, I have business cards. But follow on the website. And, you know, if you decide, you know, oh, there's a hearing I might want to show up and you know, just see what's going on or whatever, shoot me an email. You know, come sit down next to me. I can explain what's going on. You know, we can talk about particular legislators up there, who they are, what issues they might be good on, what they might not be. Maybe we don't meet up at the particular hearing, but follow what it is that we do. And, you know, there could be an opportunity where we come and say to you, you know, would you come testify on this bill? Would you come? And there's a lot of different, we didn't even get into testifying with administrative agencies and what you do after the bill is already passed, before it's implemented. I mean, there's so many ways to get involved in this whole process. We didn't need to get into that again today, but always feel free, anybody here, feel free to contact me. This is what we do. Don't be shy about it. People, I didn't want to bother you. It's like, no. That's why I give out my contact information. You're not bothering me. But you know, ultimately, what I'm hoping to do is empower you guys to do more of this type of stuff because it benefits all of us. Those of us with organizations, those of us, you know, trying to move the ball a certain direction. So it could be, you and I, you know, could start talking back and forth, and it could be, you know, what I really need you to do is contact your senator in your district there about this particular bill. You might want to maybe make talking points like this, and you know, we go back and forth. And, you know, all of these types of things that people do all the time, but. You know, and it might not be your senator representative this time. It could be 2 years down the line, 4 years down the line. But again, building relationships with legislators, building relationships with each other. So I see I'm starting to get hooked here. It's like Oscar night. Tonight's Oscar night. We're going to warm up. We're going to start playing the music. Take me off here. But thanks, everybody. I hope you learned more today and you know more than when you walked in the door. I'll be around for a few minutes. I got business cards and everything, but thank you very much for taking time on your Sunday and coming here to do what I think is a very important issue. People don't make change just by being silent about stuff. It's all about being noisy. So exercise your First Amendment rights. Be noisy. Join the ACLU. All of
It's actually going to take us just a couple minutes to get the next speaker ready, so if you want to go get the contact information, this is part of
Just know you can't go get coffee.
Where's the other
What? Where's the other mic?
How you doing?
I don't know.
A lot of times in studio, you probably don't even know me, but
Yeah.
I was at the SSA a couple of years ago in Columbus.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, you did a speech.
I work for the SSA now.
Oh, do you?
Yeah.
Awesome, that's wonderful.
I do the Southeast Line.
That's good to know. So you made it up here, up from Alabama.
Yeah, I'm here for a board meeting actually. It was over the weekend. So.
All right.
Yeah, that's interesting. Man, I was I wish I was in a place like that. I mean, even in Alabama, even the Democrats or Republicans,
It's still bad with the
It's
Democrats
just a freedom all the way. It's like even have those people with the SCA,
Yeah.
the Second Coalition, and it's,
Yes.
it's just, it's not even an uphill battle to
Yeah.
talk to them.
I think
It's like a big fence around it. You enjoy
Yeah.
it.
We're trying to get to the hill to go up.
Yes, exactly. Exactly. Is it terrible?
It's pretty bad.
You gotta find the words. You gotta find the right
But always keep in mind too, sometimes it's a limited diner. They don't live in Jackson. You know what I mean? Then it's like, why is that person from Akron? You know, right? You know, yeah.
all over the place right now.
Oh, sure.
So they're doing a speaking
Look at what the,
like,
you know,
I was gonna go to the speech.
it's called the fake news.
for a number
Oh,
of years.
another
I mean,
baby.
they are moving inspired
Yeah.
because, you know,
That's something you really have a hard time with.
right, starting, you know, 76, 80 or so, you know, everybody knows the story of the thing, Matt Robinson.
Oh, yeah. I've actually never been to the
Everybody, over a number of months and years.
I
Get yourself on
went to
this
most
school
of
board,
them.
run to your office, get yourself on this, and we will create this bottom-down movement that's going to change the way people think about things and how laws get passed.
Okay.
And they did it, and they continue to.
make your eyes water.
Yeah, and that's a hard thing.
It is.
Yeah.
I mean, it's much easier for you to get motivated because, you know,
They were friends.
exactly, they do what they, you know,
Yeah.
and then the more, and it's always the case, the more successes you see, the more inclined
And
you
some of
are
it's
to
right.
keep going
That's
with this
exactly
sort of stuff.
So-
But, you know,
There's a community back
That's the kiddos.
Yeah, like the last one. I
Yeah.
went to.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I felt this would be sick.
Yeah, well, I mean, sometimes.
I didn't